So there's one particular concept in Final Fantasy VII that I really hope the remake is going to reimagine in the next level kind of way. And I think that from the latest screenshots and images and even leaked gameplay demos that we've seen, there's a real hint that Square are taking this concept to the next level. I think it could be such a goldmine opportunity in making the remake feel even grittier, angstier, darker, but also more relevant to the age we live in today, because of course 21st century media, I think we're all kind of in agreement that the news, it has become a hack, a sham, a mouthpiece for the status quo in pushing their propaganda and indeed how they influence a society's mindset. This is something I've been really interested this week, so to see the remake showing kind of hints of this, it was quite synchronistic. Now what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about these images here. These were recently shown in Night Sky Princes, who I think got from a channel called Vizuvazdeath, an awesome Final Fantasy community member. And one of the things they showed was a upper plate Midgar. This is something we've never really seen much of besides going to the Shinra building, but we've seen it in trailers now, and definitely in these images. What living above the plate is like, where the sun shines and the streets look lovely and beautiful, kind of a New York in style, Night Sky Prince pointed out, which I agree is quite ironic considering that was the original premise for FF7. What we see with these images is the way that Shinra used them to market to the whole of Midgar City. That life with Shinra is great, that Mako energy is clean, it's bringing a new radiant future where the people are living a better quality of life. Of course, this is BS, we know it. This was the BS that they sold to the people of Mount Coral, Barrett's original town. And we see this throughout FF7, the way that Shinra, who are essentially a group of gangsters, for no other way to say it, who are running this hellish metropolis, of course for their own gains. And that's what I really loved about the screenshot we saw of just even the Shinra building, like the first floor, that dark authoritarian regime kind of vibe that you get from it. And this could be something really interesting to see in the remake, especially again because today something that we can all find relatable to some degree is the way that regimes use the media to indoctrinate and push their propaganda with the people to get away with the stuff that they get away with. And of course the way that media happily props that up and they act as mouthpieces for this totally corrupt agenda. And I've been curious, how is it that that happens even in our real life societies? And there's actually been a lot of interesting research out on this, talking about how we even interact with information and news these days. That is fundamentally changed from the way it used to be in terms of the amount of information that would flow and the mediums that we would receive them through. A lot of it was nowhere near as saturated and in your face as it is today. So how is it that despite being bombarded with more information than we ever have been in history, that we still make these catastrophic choices when it comes to leaders and what we allow the narrative of our society to be set to by these corporate elites? And one of those things is that and this was a scientist called Filippo Menza, and he was a professor of informatics and computer science who created what he called the Observatory of Social Media, or awesome for short. And what he created this to track viral thinking and sharing patterns on various news and media platforms. And this experiment is how misinformation spreads, how flooding the channels of news and information with noise by things like fake accounts, fake narratives, even bots, which we clearly even see Shinra resorting to these kind of methods, especially with what we've seen in these screenshots, the adverts, the propaganda, even things like what we see in, say, Wutai, how they strip them of all their materia, how they subjugate their culture. Or even if we go to like Junon, I always thought it was really like cute and fun and happy, and it kind of made me laugh when you see the Rufus Shinra's parade. It's got a happy theme and it's kind of funny because the soldiers, they just they look so funky and chunky in their polygons. But when you actually look at it, this is really quite something dark. When we look at authoritarian regimes that have either overthrown or come into power, again, non-democratically, and they have these kind of military processions and parades to show off their military It doesn't come across that way outside of video games. It comes across as dark. It comes across as, again, authoritarian. And I even think something like the Rufus Shinra parade, done in AAA graphics, reimagined in the remake, could come across as something much darker. This dude has just taken the helm of one of the largest and most evil corporations that is running this world with an iron grip. And these methods, of course, they're there to inspire fear, to shut down any dissenting voices, attack political opponents, show off military might. Even the idea of just creating enough conflict in the people's day-to-day lives that it floods it with noise. And what Filippo Menza found is that with this flood of conflicting messages, users who they did this experiment on started to become stressed out. They start to share information more indiscriminately without any real care for the facts or the nuances or the details. Actual real facts, and then also completely out there wild fallacies. And what they found is it didn't actually matter. Both would perform just as well. In fact, a lot of the time, the more controversial, heated, and divisive information, even if it was false, had a higher likelihood to share. So it gets the entire platform into an overstimulated state where care for accuracy infinitely drops. It becomes a more emotional, but not in a rational, analytical kind of way where facts or even obvious logic is ruling the day, but instead a very distinct narrative that, if forced by a group of people with a determined agenda to stick to it, that they can have a considerable influence, more than they should, on controlling the narrative of media. And this is a pretty alarming confirmation that this scientist found. You would think, the concept of news and information would be different. That would be something handled by the frontal part of our brains, known as the prefrontal cortex, as this is the logic handling center of our lumpy head meats. What he found is it's more the side parts of the mind, the different hemispheres, and actually more towards the right side. Now, the right hemisphere of the brain deals more with non-verbal signals. These are things like tone of voice, intensity, timing, gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, and posture. These are regions closely associated with our engagement with people face to face, of being in front of emotional telltale signs where intuition can act unfiltered about what the person is saying or not. Now, of course, when we get most of information from a TV screen, we're trying to process news and information not with the logical centers of our brains, but the socializing aspect. But the socializing mediums through which they come are deeply flawed. They're not real human interactions. And what scientists are saying is that this is creating quite an unnatural phenomena in how we go about interpreting news in media, and in fact how it can have an influence over us. Information spread around in a very subliminally targeted way that impact our day-to-day lives and have lasting impact on our brains, while they're kind of vulnerable and off guard to receiving it. And I'd argue a lot of world regimes, and definitely Shinra, find a way to tap into it and to use it to their advantage. Again, even if most of this information is bullshit and the person has all the proof in their own material reality around them to see it's bullshit, still somehow it's possible for the entire lens of truth that person looks through to be influenced. So yeah, I guess this is kind of like an elaborate confirmation that sheeple do exist. A concept, that was shared in Persona 5 and I really loved. That illustrated it during the Prison of Regression, I think it was called, where individuals who were willing to sacrifice their freedom of thinking, to give away their cognitive autonomy to their held status quo because they feared change. They feared independent thinking. It's easier to conform than it is to even build up the energy to resist, to even educate yourself to the point of resisting. And in fact, this is also a part of the method of control, because one would think that the worse the living conditions of the people, the more likely it is that they would rise up. You'd think that, and not to say it doesn't, it certainly can spill over into riots and protests and uprisings. But with authoritarian regimes like Shinra, they actively work to repress, silence, and manipulate these dissenters. And part of the harsh living conditions, the harsh, stressful conditions, it actually contributes towards that, towards them being too busy, too tired, too confused to even seek the truth or engage in social reform. Most people just care about getting by day to day. And then you start introducing the concepts of different ideological teams and then wealth hierarchies. And boom, we have a situation like we have in Midgar, where indoctrination and media are clearly rife, and it looks like Square Enix are making an effort to present that from these latest remake images, which I love. Like Jesse, for example, where there is a TV ad showing for Shinra, and it's pushing their propaganda and their slogans, making the world clean again, or whatever it is, and it's actually Jesse who hacks through it. She hacks through the propaganda feed, and it's little things like that in how they build up Shinra's control that I'm super interested in. I can't wait to see how far Square Enix really go with it. And what I'd love to see is the concept that FF7 Original even kind of pointed out, that it's not even often about trying to convince people that you're the good guys with authoritarian regimes, that sometimes just by throwing enough mud into the narrative, it's enough to murky the truth. And usually that's enough, and that can be done through controlling the flow of media, and we see that in places like Calm. Well, no, this was a town Shinra actually destroyed, killing most of its residents during a continental weapon testing program. That went wrong, and all they had to do to cover this up was rebuild the town, reorganize the minds of the residents of the town, say that it never happened, and boom. Quiet, happy little village with no trace of its dark past. Even more noticeable is when they do this with Nibelheim, and undoubtedly this will be presented to us in the remake, that upon returning to Nibelheim, remember when Tifa and Cloud, they see the place functioning as normal, that there's no signs it was ever destroyed or burnt down. And this village, though secretly with largely paid actors, they're planted there to tell the story that there was no fire, that it never happened, and voila, notice how even Tifa and Cloud, who saw it, like they actually saw firsthand the disaster that happened, now even they're beginning to doubt it. And this is really dark. This is a really dark but important side of what Shinra does that I think we could really see get reimagined, fleshed out, because this happens in real life. And for example, 1989. Let's go to Tiananmen Square, where a massacre of hundreds, maybe thousands of people happened, and it's where we had the infamous Tank Man shot come from. Now, it was interesting to see that reporters who took that shot and took the story of Tiananmen Square and asked people in China if they even knew about it, what they found is that after 30 years of careful censorship by the authoritarian Chinese regime, that they were hard-pressed to find almost anyone, even people living near the square it happened, aware of what Tiananmen Square massacre was. Like it never happened. And this is part of the victors often getting to rewrite the story. And I really do think FF7 boldly tackled these kind of themes. Another method that I will finally share with you guys before I leave is, when it comes to muddying the water, rather than just erasing it, you could even just introduce some other villain, some other focus for the people's outrage, because telling people who live shit lives that they in fact don't live shit lives, that's a method of social control that of course isn't gonna hold up for long. Eventually the pot will boil over. People will say, no, fuck you, America ain't great again. And we see this with Shinra. So what do you do in this case? Well, you drag in a new focus of attention that people's anger and outrage can center upon. And this is why the FF7 remake pillar collapse, which I definitely think is going to be the first episode's sort of biggest event. It'll probably be the most dramatic thing to happen in the first part. And I think it should be, because in the remake, it's going to be so much more thematically charged and alive to witness. If Square Enix show what a deplorable yet genius manipulating faction that Shinra is, exterminating an entire sector, then pinning it on Avalanche as the ones who did it, this created a new public enemy that the citizens could vilify. And the length of extreme that Shinra go to here, again, as pointed out by Reeve, it costs billions in damages for the company, but it's arguably the length that Shinra is willing to go to force a narrative change. This really highlights and emphasizes just how much they actually do fear Avalanche themselves for being a message of what must already be spreading. And Shinra must be aware of that there is dissatisfaction and disillusion amongst the people. And that's why they're willing to drop a damn plate in order to combat it. And that's the kind of stuff I want to see. Shinra's fake news affects, not even just Midgar, but many cities around the world. Could really be a theme that Square Enix could lean into to really build Shinra up as the intimidating foe that I really do think they are. And I think it will be pretty profound with the new realism that the remake is going to be coming with. It's just another way to make the game great. So there we go, guys. Final Fantasy VII Remake and fake news. And I'm definitely sure there is more to the psychology of politics and to authoritarian regimes. So if anyone has any interesting input, share it in the comment section below. And what else do you think Square Enix might bring to the table to emphasize just how dark and corrupt Shinra really are? I can't wait to see it. But thank you for watching. I will see you on the next video. Keep out!